Alright, my darlings. Well, we've reached the Christmas season again, and what is Christmas all about?
Peace and love and goodwill to all men?
No, it's about getting new toys. And over the years, there have been a ton of movies and TV shows that have brought us iconic toys. But I'd argue that no other franchise has provided more iconic Christmas list swag than our main subject today. I am, of course, talking about the puppet cult classic that is Thunderbirds.
Thunderbirds are go.
Yes, the show that created the concept of Super Marionation and took an idea that should have crashed and burned back in the day, but launched it into one of the biggest franchises in history. And we're going to take a look at its entire history and how it evolved over the years.
Oh boy, this is gonna be a big one, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But let's not waste any time and get straight into the history of its creation. The series is the brainchild of Jerry and Sylvia Anderson, a pair of puppetry and special effects veterans who got their start making puppet shows in the 50s, like Torchy the Battery Boy, which I've talked about before, and have sadly not been able to repress the nightmares I got while watching it.
Take my curlers out, Flopsy! I'm sure my hair's frizzy now.
All right, come and sit next to me.
So I can kill you.
But also worked on similar shows like Two Feather Falls, The Adventures of Twizzle, and Fireball XL5. And even in these early days, you can see the seeds of their talent, with Jerry's skill in pyrotechnics and other special effects, and, on the shows where she was actually allowed to use them, Sylvia's skills in puppet making and voice acting. The pair were even able to direct and write a few episodes of the shows they worked on, which allowed them to snowball the skills that they needed that would lead to the creation of Thunderbirds. Oh yeah, and Jerry started his relationship with Sylvia while they were working on Twizzle.
Aw, that's sweet.
And Jerry was already married at the time.
Aw, that's not so sweet.
As time went on, the couple went on to patent their own form of puppetry, which they would call Super Marionation. The technique is not so different from regular marionette puppetry, but the main difference is that the puppets are weighted down so they don't seem so floaty and their feet rarely leave the ground. The models are made with much greater detail, and the biggest addition, the solenoid-powered mouths, which are made to be timed with pre-recorded dialogue. Previously, marionette puppets' mouths were controlled with strings, but with this, it made the mouse movements, at the time at the very least, look a lot more realistic, and allowed the puppeteers to focus more on the body movements so that the puppets moved more fluently, and meant the heads wouldn't have to jerk around when they talked. They also gave more attention to the eyes, with them actually being in the head and being able to move around instead of being glued or painted on. While I will concede that the puppetry is still impressive to this day, it does still look a little awkward sometimes, especially the mouth movement, since I don't think most people talk like this. How do you do, fellow humans? I am just moving my mouth in the way that we always do.
Okay, that was just weird.
But, of course, the selling points of Thunderbirds wasn't just about the puppets, it was also about the elaborate miniatures and working models of the vehicles and devices that were used on the show. But enough about the behind the scenes. What's the plot? In the future time of the 2060s, although it still feels like the 1960s, the people of the First World, mostly the rich and entitled ones, are in constant danger of terrorists and natural disasters cutting short their lovely holidays. In particular, those perpetuated by the Vile Hood. Fortunately for these 1%ers of the world, there is an organisation making sure that one of your many homes won't have its value slightly diminished, that being the world-renowned International Rescue, run by the Tracy family head Jeff and his sons, the pilots of the fantastic vehicles that carry out the rescue operations. Scott, John, Virgil, Gordon, and Alan, the pilots of the titular Thunderbirds. In their numerical order, there's the Quick Response, though have those words in very big quotations, and we'll get to why later. Convertible Rocket Thunderbird 1, the Heavy-Duty Cargo and Equipment Loading Freight Plane Thunderbird 2, the Orbit-Achieving Space Rescue Red Rocket Thunderbird 3, the Depth-Plunging Reliant Robin-Resembling Submarine Thunderbird 4, and the Space Station Relay Hub Thunderbird 5.
So, one very rich family in the 1960s were capable of creating space stations and super high-pressure resistant vehicles on their own?
Sad truth is, when someone tried to do the same thing quite recently, it didn't work out so well.
Whoa, too soon.
Oh, come on, you said way worse than that before.
Well, yes, but I'm cute enough to get away with it.
Beyond that, there's not too many twists, turns, or developments. The show is more or less a series of self-contained serials of various adventures about the plights of international rescue and their attempts to stop the Hood. Every time they say that, I keep expecting to see International Rescue take on Ice Cube.
We got a problem here?
It's very much like a Saturday morning cartoon from the 80s, though this was actually one of the first shows to make this formula popular, so it was a landmark in television, not just for its effects and style, but also the way it was written. But, of course, the things that people remember the most are the puppets and the vehicles. Looking back on the puppets now, it's impossible not to watch them and giggle a little bit in how awkward they seem now, but even in spite of that, or perhaps because of it does give it a genuine charm that you can really see the effort and craft that went into both making them and operating them. You do sometimes see the strings, but not often, and when you do, again, it just adds to that quaint charm of the show. It's a lot like the old Doctor Who series. Yeah, it's very corny and cheap looking now, but those elements that worked and the effort that was put in by everyone involved does help carry it and still make it entertaining today. Plus that classy old-fashioned British charm, and those elements that haven't aged well in a non-insensitive way. Yeah, we'll get to that later. In many ways make it more entertaining, even if unintentionally. However, the miniatures and the vehicles are by far the best part of the show. Wow, these things really still hold up now. And yeah, they are still a little dated every once in a while, like when they have the tiny people on top of the cars.
Whee!
Which Sabutio table did Jerry nick those from? But for the most part, they are epic and look amazing. You almost never think that you're looking at a miniature, you just see a rocket taking off or a plane flying through the air. And the amount of time they give for you to catch every last detail really makes it a treat to watch. Although this does come to the downside of how the Thunderbirds take almost a whole 5 minutes to take off and arrive at their destinations. And that's how we see it. In cinematic time, it's probably several hours.
Still faster than NHS Direct, though.
The other downside this causes, much like the old Doctor Who series, is that the serials go on for so long. Each episode is around 45 minutes long, and the show's not very efficient with its use of runtime, so it is so slow.
Yeah, these episodes do drag on for ages, but you'd know all about that, wouldn't you?
Wow, now you're even mocking our own show.
It's the last video of the year, and I just don't give a shit anymore.
You're just bitter that we're not doing the Dark Crystal show this month. And yes, I know the reason it's so slow is that they play the model shots in slow motion because it gives more weight and realism to their movement. But did it have to be this slow? Granted, it does make the exciting moments all the more actually exciting because you have to wait for such a long time to get to them. It's like tantric action scenes. You wait for ages to get to it, and it's fun when it does happen. And once you get there, you think, well, that wasn't worth waiting 45 minutes for. But regardless, the craft of the series is excellent, thanks in large part to Derek Meddings. The materials they use look so smooth and solid, and the use of colour is great, and they really work well with the old-fashioned cinematography, and they still pop even through that muted video photography. Probably helped by the use of more natural and dull colours for the sets and more mundane parts of the show. It does really help give it an old-fashioned comic book look. The use of pyrotechnics is really impressive too, especially given the scale of the miniatures. To get them to be in scale with them, and to not accidentally set everything around it on fire. It's really impressive, and it really does help add a sense of realism and scaling to everything and makes it look all the more believable. Plus, it just looks really cool.
Everything is made better with fire.
I told you that we'd never talk about that again.
What? No one was hurt in that fire.
But I lost all of my hair!
And nothing of value was lost.
Even the sets and backdrops are so meticulously well made, and they really do help put you in the world. Especially considering that they use household objects to make a lot of them. You can never beat PVA glue and toilet paper tubes. Granted, compared to what the standards are like nowadays, the voice acting is a little old-fashioned and a tad hokey, but you never get the sense that the actors are playing along or doing this ironically. They are just doing what they need to do and making sure they draw the audience's attention in.
Negative. No sign of an entrance. Hey, wait. I've picked up something. I think I've got it.
Look, don't panic. There's probably still some air left in those tanks.
I'm certain they're doing their best, sir. Yeah, I guess they are.
They give their dialogue the weight and importance that it needs, and it really does help make the show more engaging. There is one slightly dark shadow hanging over our comments, and that's the depiction of ethnicities, as, of course, this show was made in the 60s and involves international affairs, made by people from a country that wasn't really involved in much of the Cold War conflict. So, naturally, many of the villains were the fallback non-Russian villain stereotype of the time, generic Asians, and not all of them were portrayed particularly flatteringly.
My pictures, they are ruined. Someone will pay for this. I will not fail you, General. The gold will be mine.
Hey, rescue organizations and kids shows can be surprisingly racist. Paw Patrol wouldn't let me in because I'm a fox.
You tried to join Paw Patrol?
Yeah, the only reason I'm here is because they turned me down, and this was the only gig I could get. I asked them, am I not a canine? Do I not have paws?
To which they probably said, yes, and you just ate the birds we were trying to save.
What? I was hungry.
Either way, yeah, this does make the show a little awkward to watch now, including the character of Kirano, Mr. Tracy's servant, who is a very old-school Asian servant-style character.
Mr. Tracy, you are the finest man I have ever had the privilege to work for.
But this was something that was a thing at the time, and you can't really change the past, so it's better to just accept it and move on. And it does help that they sort of leave it vague what nationality a lot of the characters are supposed to be. I mean, just look at the Hood. What race is he supposed to be? Massive crazy eyes, huge eyebrows, a big bald head.
So, he's you?
What?
You just described yourself.
I suppose I did, though I wish I had psychic powers, then I could get you to obey me.
You could try, but you might not like what you find inside.
Either way, this is just something you have to get used to in old shows, and it never comes off as mean-spirited. I mean, compared to what British TV shows would give us in the following decade, it's tame by comparison, but just be aware of it if you've not seen it before. There's also the issue of how most of the Tracys are rather bland Boy Scout hero archetypes, though granted that can be attributed more to the time period and how writing tropes were for heroes in TV shows at the time. They would sometimes try to diversify the boys every once in a while, especially in the movies, but they are very bland, and it's not helped how, while the modelling on their faces is excellent, in an attempt to make sure that they look related, they all kinda look the same, and they all sound kinda the same as well. Jeff Tracy is a bit more fleshed out, which is very fitting since he's more or less the main character, and the side characters have a lot more, well, I won't say personality, but liveliness and memorable attributes about them, such as the head scientist Brains as the lovable dork who constantly seems like he's on the verge of wetting himself as soon as he opens his mouth.
Yes, certainly, Professor. We'll do just that. We do seem to have caused a lot of trouble one way and another.
So he's basically Otacon from Metal Gear. And of course there's field agents Lady Penelope, voiced by Sylvia herself, even if she does make the young noble sound like an old lady.
International Rescue. Lady Penelope speaking. Oh dear, how inconvenient.
In her iconic six-wheeled convertible Rolls-Royce, and her driver and manservant Parker, who has provided this show with its third most famous catchphrase outside of Thunderbirds Are Go and FAB.
Belady, 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 belady.
Given how many times Thunderbirds were used for ads in the future, and yes, we'll get to those too, I'm amazed they never used Parker for a decongestant ad. Instead, they used him for a Halifax ad.
Hello, can I help?
Have been sent this letter asking me to pop in.
Oh, can I have a look, please? You've won the top prize in our Savers prize draw.
Where the life-size version of his puppet looks super creepy. I wonder if that teller was thinking, oh good, the acid's kicked in. Those two are probably my favourite characters on the show, simply because of Penelope's glamorous don't give no shits attitude to anything, and Parker's hilariously nasally voice.
Plus, the obsession she has with Pink helps keep the Thunderbirds toys encroaching on the Barbie market for years.
And yet, surprisingly, Mattel never fought back at them for this. Then again, in terms of British toys encroaching on their market, they had more to focus on with Cindy.
And the fact she's not gotten a live-action movie by Greta Gerwig shows what happened to her.
Indeed. But either way, this show, while having its flaws, is still fun to watch at times, and is still a huge landmark in not just television, but media in general. And as hard as hell as I'm sure it was to make, it does look like it was a lot of fun. And the show's success also is in no small part thanks to the great Yorkshirean-style brass band music provided by Barry Gray, and its now iconic intro. Sad truth is, it's impossible not to want to edit in unrelated clips at the end of the countdown just to make a joke.
3, 2, 1.
Sorry, couldn't resist. But of course, the show became a huge part of popular culture, and its unique production style, fantastic music, and iconic intro made it a staple in pop culture. This day expanded into more shows that the Andersons made, like Captain Scarlet, Stingray, The Terrorhawks, Joe 90, and even a few movies like Thunderbirds 6 and Thunderbirds Are Go, in which they went for some even more ambitious things with the puppets, and even have them make more expressive faces, for better or worse.
And I thought Hugo Weaving was the one to invent that look.
The resemblance between him and those puppets is quite uncanny, I must say. In fact, I have always wondered how he keeps looking so young and his skin looks so plastic. I wonder. And, as I mentioned before, the show has also spawned thousands of toys, many of which have gone on to be considered all-time classics. Hell, the amount of times they've made mini versions of Tracy Island with interactive parts is insane, and it is probably one of the most popular Christmas toys of all time. Although it's a real shame that in the age of video games, the only major Thunderbirds game we ever got was this piece of shit. Screw you, Blast Games! And, of course, the Super Mario Nation style was used in countless other media like spoofs, tributes, and even officially made ads featuring the characters.
Hit the hut.
Get a Thunderbirds cup, a kid's soft drink, and a kid's cheese and tomato pizza for $2.99.
The Thunderbirds know what the best pizza chain is.
Oh, hell no. Domino's all the way.
You just like them because you ate a load of them when you were living behind the bins.
Hey, I saw more of them than any other pizza chain boxes back in those days, so that just shows how popular they were.
And the fact that they were always unfinished pizzas shows how bad they were too. Hell, there was even a short-lived anime based off of Thunderbirds.
Thunderbirds 2086.
I can't say I'm surprised it was popular in Japan. It's got all the hallmark signs. It's creative, it's weird, it has a ton of toy potential, all the things that Japan loves.
Add in tentacle porn and it'd be the most popular thing in Japan.
Of course, like any iconic franchise that lasts a long time, it means that big producers see it as a quick and easy way to make money without originality, and so in 2004 we got the live-action adaptation of the series. The film was directed by Jonathan Frakes, who played William Riker on Star Trek, and has seen previous success with directing kid-friendly action movies with Clockstoppers 2 years earlier. And getting him to direct was actually quite clever, since Star Trek does have some similarities with Thunderbirds. Plus the screenwriter, William Osborne, helped bring us things like Twins and GoldenEye. But he also brought us Fat Slags and Stop All My Mum Will Shoot, and it's not a good sign that this was the last movie he ever worked on. It's going to make watching this movie like watching an execution, but one that goes on for an hour and a half, which, to be fair, is still quicker than watching someone be hung, drawn and quartered. Also, the story was done by Peter Hewitt, who did the Thunderpants movie, and I'd hate to think that he got this job because he was on that movie. It'd be like Seltzerberg making a Twilight movie because of vampires suck.
But would they really do any worse than any other director could for those stories?
Fair point. I will say that the idea for the movie is actually quite clever, having Alan not only be a preteen this time, but similar to his role in Thunderbirds Are Go, feeling resentful over how being the baby of the family, he feels like he's not taken seriously and hasn't had the chance to prove himself. And having him be a kid makes him more relatable to the kid audience. And now that his dad and brothers are stuck up on Thunderbird 5, he does have a chance to prove himself. That's quite a good idea.
Alan? He's just a kid.
He's a Tracy.
But let me guess, it didn't work very well?
Oh, how did you guess? Yeah, while the idea of the movie's plot had promise, and it does have some great actors like Bill Paxton, Ron Cook, and even a young Vanessa Hudgens, it's not that great of a movie. The movie does feel very kiddie, and granted, I understand them aiming it at a kid audience, it does make it feel like they're almost pandering towards children, having the kids be the protagonists. While again, it's not a bad idea, it does really make the other members of International Rescue look useless. And also makes the Hood and his gang look a lot less intimidating when a bunch of brats were able to take him down. Not to mention, the film looks ugly as sin. It's way too colourful and not in a nice way. The overload of very gaudy colours makes it look really cheap and immature, especially since the original series utilised colour in a really sophisticated and clever way. This just looks like there's a nasty orange sheen over everything.
Donald Trump's stylist must have been the cinematographer.
I will admit that the effects aren't that bad. I mean, they don't look real by any means, but for a 2004 kids movie, it's not bad. They do use a mix of practical and CGI effects in a respectable way, so I can give them credit there. And, as always, Penelope and Parker are the best parts of it.
That is good news, my lady.
Oh, and apparently England won the football last night.
Yes,
Guess he got tired of being controlled by an evil TV presenter. Also, while Ben Kingsley is awesome to watch as he always is, the bit where he controls Brain and moves him in an imitation of the original Super Mario Nation movement style, that was just painful.
Like a puppet on a string.
Ugh. Honestly, this movie did have some potential, but we spend way too long with those damn kids who, while they do a decent job acting-wise, they're not really what you come to see from a Thunderbirds movie. And I really feel like they're pandering to the kid audience, and the titular Thunderbirds are barely in it. Still, I guess they didn't have too much to work with. I mean, what must the budget have been like on this movie?
$57 million.
How much? And then, of course, we have the main theme by the pop group Busted. A lot of people were annoyed with this song, and I can certainly understand. Busted were an annoying band. All you need to do is watch the music video for clarification of that.
Is it me, or does it sound like they're saying Thunderbirds are go?
But the fact that they use them doesn't surprise me at all. After all, Cliff Richard appeared in the previous Thunderbirds movie, and just be thankful that Busted didn't hijack this movie to perform a song. Though it would have been funny to see them portrayed in the Super Mario Nation style, since then they look like exactly what they were, puppets of old music producers. The subtext has become reality. Though I will admit the little bit of the original theme song that's mixed in there, that is kinda cool. Also, here's a bit of backstory for you. When I saw this movie, it was on TV in 2007 after coming back from the dentist the very same day I got my braces installed. So the scene where Alan gets orally tortured to have his retainer removed to get some wire was something I really could relate to that day. I feel ya, Alan. Either way, the movie's by no means the worst film I've ever seen, and it does have its moments, but it's not very good, and it did bomb at the box office hard, and killed interest in the franchise for years afterwards. And it doesn't even feel like Thunderbirds, it just feels like some sort of Nickelodeon movie that just happens to have some cool planes and rockets in it. Needless to say, Jerry Anderson didn't like the movie, describing it as the, quote, biggest load of crap I've ever seen in my life, though Sylvia actually liked the movie and called it a good tribute.
Given that they were broken up at that point, maybe she just said it to piss him off.
Probably. What's sad though is that around this same time, a movie that actually used the Thunderbirds technique came out and was awesome and proved that it can be done. And it was a spoof of all things, Team America. Made by the creators of South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they actually contacted the people who still made Super Mario Nation puppetry to give them a hand in making the movie, and it was amazing. In fact, the film was actually made in response to how the two were disappointed in how the official movie was not going to use the puppets, and they actually didn't even like Thunderbirds, but they felt that the movie was not true to its origins and should be made that way. That shows just how iconic the show was, that even people who didn't like the series were willing to make a movie that was a loving tribute to it because the official product was letting down the fans. The film itself has nothing to do with Thunderbirds outside of the obvious spoof aspect, but it's still worth checking out. Parker and Stone very rarely do anything that isn't awesome, it's hilarious, and a very faithful tribute to the classic series, and, like with anything they make, has amazing music.
I wish we had a theme song like that.
Well, that can be arranged.
Headphones UK, come to YouTube to watch the motherfucking review. Headphones UK, reviews are the only way, yeah. Steve reviews, your game is through, cause you have to answer to Headphones UK.
Now how come you got to sing that?
My voice is deeper. It needed a masculine tone.
Well, I know a way to raise your voice a few octaves.
Ew. But despite the negative reception towards the movie, it wasn't enough to kill interest in the franchise, as it would keep popping up from time to time, and the success of the other Anderson shows during this era helped keep it in the mindset of the public. Which brings us to the most recent version of the show, Thunderbirds Are Go, which released in 2015 on CITV. This series ditches the puppets and goes for the big thing of this generation, CGI, and while naturally hardcore fans of the original series were mad about this initially, me personally I think they made the right call. Obviously nowadays the technology for puppetry has advanced a lot, so we could probably make something more sophisticated in terms of puppets for the show, but it would have been hard to have the kids go along with the show and have it being able to stand up with the more modern shows with much more advanced animation. So yeah, I think this was the best option they could go with, which was another thing that people complained about this series at first, the fact that it was aimed only at kids and not all audiences, which is what the original series did. And while granted it is a shame that they didn't try to do that, since by having it be slightly more mature meant that they might have been able to go darker and more complex with the stories, let's face it would have been hard to get a more adult audience on board with a show like this, especially since around the time the show came out was the start of the big fall-off of young adult television audiences, where people aged between 13 to 35 stopped watching TV altogether in favour of streaming and online content. I mean, now the only people who watch live TV are fed up old people who just want to watch the same boring shit over and over again to count down the minutes before they die.
Well, they love your stuff then.
Very funny. However, the old techniques were not abandoned entirely. The part of the Thunderbirds production that is still used sometimes today, miniatures and models, are still used in the series. Most of the larger sets and vehicles are all real-life models that are dynamically filmed with cameras for the purpose of the characters' movements and their story, and then the CGI elements are animated in post-production. It's an amazing process, and it must have been hell to do, but they pulled it off amazingly. It looks fantastic, and it's great to see them remain faithful to the spirit of the original, while still updating it appropriately. Apparently, even some of the models and sets used household objects as part of its construction, just like the original series did.
Aw, that is so sweet that they would stay true to the original series that much.
Maybe we should do the same for a future video, make little sets and film in them.
You know full well I have no thumbs, so I can't do that.
I know, I just wanted to rub it in. Also, the pace and tone of the show has been cranked way up. It's way more exciting, there's a greater sense of danger and anticipation, the voice actors do a great job with injecting more life and drama into their performances, and there's even some more layers to the overall story. In the first episode, it's established that Jeff Tracy is missing, presumed dead, so there's an underlying subplot and sense of wonder and intrigue where the Tracys keep trying to find out what happened to him and reunite, which is a great way to keep the viewers engaged. Also, side note, Jeff's voiced by Lee Majors. Yes, that Lee Majors.
Hello, Marge, I'm Lee Majors. Will you come away with me?
Huck, what are you doing?
Yes, Lee Majors, I will go away with you.
He's got to stop fantasizing about Lee Majors. Also, another side note, wow, if I didn't already look like the Hood before, I sure as hell do now. I would say that they used me as the basis for the design, but back in 2015 I didn't look like that, as I'm sure long-time viewers can attest to. The intro is also pretty damn epic, with a great update of the classic theme. It is also legit funny, and it has some really good banter between the characters, and while not every joke is good, it does help give some more personality and charm to them.
I'm head of security for International Rescue, and I don't even have my own ship. And right now I'm up here...
What, babysitting?
I wasn't going to say that.
Oh, you were totally going to say that.
Okay, I was.
There are still some odd choices made though. For example, Brains is now Indian. Why, I don't know. And if it was purely for the act of making the show more diverse, they still have their equivalent of Tintin with KO, so it felt a bit unnecessary, but it's not a big deal. Brains is still more or less the same character with just a slightly different accent.
Let's have a look at that hatch deployment actuator. Oops. Sorry, Max.
Also, the CGI, while good for a British-made series, isn't anything that special. But it does certainly do its job, and it by no means looks bad, and the integration with the models for the vehicles is pretty bloody seamless. The first time I watched the show, I had no idea it wasn't CGI. That is really impressive. It takes a lot to replace animation with something from the real world and make it work. For example... You see? It doesn't work quite as well, does it? The designs of the characters are also pretty good too, and they do their best to try and recreate the feel of the original puppets, though that does bring the downside of their eyes looking a bit buggy and oversized. I'm getting Alita Battle Angel vibes right now. Also, fun fact, Weta Workshop actually helped work on this series because Peter Jackson is a fan of Thunderbirds.
And his movies do have one thing in common with episodes of the classic series.
They're too long?
No, the characters in them all look brain dead.
Well, regardless of its flaws, this show is a fantastic update to the original series, done with love and affection for it, whilst also making it appealing to newer audiences as well. And to keep that balance is incredibly hard, but they pulled it off. It's not the same as the original series, but I think it's a fitting tribute and a good way to enjoy the franchise if you couldn't get into the original series. But, of course, nothing can beat the retro charm of the original series, even if I have to concede that as a show, the new series is superior in many ways. The original cannot ever be forgotten. As of now, the 2015 series is the last thing that this franchise has given us, outside of a few more ads and minor tributes and 3 brand new anniversary episodes made as part of a Kickstarter using audio from the audio dramas, which is pretty cool. And yes, of course it had audio dramas. It seems that every big British franchise of the 60s did. But it's been a good note to go out on, and I'm excited to see what the franchise gives us next. Thunderbirds, and by extension the Andersons' whole career in TV, while it may seem odd and silly now, cannot be disregarded as just a dumb leftover from the past. Despite the shows not being perfect by any means, they did change the world in a number of ways, and still have a die-hard love and respect for it even now. Like I said, I can totally understand if you can't get into the older shows, but I feel that it is something that we should respect for what it did for television and beyond. But, for now, I've had...
Oh, forget the sign-off. Someone's in trouble and needs our help.
Roger.
Oh.
Calling International Rescue. Emergency, guys. Trouble is brewing and we need you immediately.
FAB.
FAB.
Thunderbird 2, ready for liftoff.
Thunderbird 1. Likewise.
See, this is why foxes shouldn't drive.
I told you I haven't got opposable thumbs. What do you expect?
Oh, for God's sake. I knew I shouldn't have trusted those idiots. Thunderbird 5 to Joe. Come in, Joe.
Well, sod this. We're off round the other side to have a bath.
And several stitches. What the?
Happy holidays, everyone.